Welcome to Alpha504, Alpha Application Server for IIS. In this course, you are going to learn how to install and use the Alpha Anywhere Application Server for IIS. This powerful deployment platform can turbocharge your Alpha Anywhere applications. Knowing how to set up, configure, and deploy to IIS will simplify your life and allow you to quickly take advantage of the enormous power of the IIS platform. In this course, we are going to be covering the following topics. What is the Alpha Anywhere Application Server for IIS? How does the Application Server for IIS compare to other hosting options, including the Alpha Anywhere Application Server Standalone and Alpha Cloud? How to set up the Application Server for IIS? How to configure the environment and the security elements for Application Server for IIS? How to deploy your application from the development environment into this environment? How the security environment is different from the standalone Alpha Anywhere Application Server, and how to configure the different types of security options that are available within this new environment. By the end of this course, you'll be able to confidently set up, configure, and deploy applications to the Alpha Anywhere Application Server for IIS environment.
Goals of this are very clear to help you master how to use the Alpha Anywhere IIS system in terms of deploying and setting up and configuring it. And we're very excited to be able to offer this. It's part of our continuing certification series. We've already had a web API one, mobile development. We have other ones coming up later this year, and Dave will supply all the information about those upcoming courses coming up from there. A couple quick logistic things. This is a 2-hour session. We're actually going to break at 50 minutes at 50 minutes, give you a minute to stand up, stretch, so you have a 10-minute break at 12:50 Central Time, 1:50 Eastern Time. You make calls, whatever, and we always like to do a little break in there to make sure people stay fresh and that we don't overwhelm them by just droning on for too long. I know my voice can get annoying, so I like to give people a break so they don't go crazy or something like that. So again, prep on that so you can plan on any calls there. And really, we have one goal, and we want to provide the knowledge to effectively install and monitor and utilize the Alpha Application Server for IIS, which includes not only the installation of the software, which we're going to walk through how to set it up and how to configure it on a server, but also beyond that, also how to set up your publishing profiles and a little bit about security and other pieces there. So there's a few nuances that are different from a Alpha standalone server versus the IIS server that we want to illustrate and make sure you understand and that you have a feel for. So when you're dealing with either one, you can come at from the right frame of mind and the right context that goes with it. The really cool thing is that once you kind of have the deployment, the setup and deployment and the publishing setup, the rest of Alpha works the same. That's kind of one of the really cool things about the Alpha Anywhere IIS server is that we take care of all the differences between the environments. So once you get set up, you're good to go. For instance, when you're doing integrating it with security, all of our regular security components and XBasic commands and everything else work identical. So the beauty of that is that once you kind of get the understanding of how to set it up and deploy it, the rest is just plain vanilla Alpha, and you won't have any problems there. That's one of the key goals that the development team had, was saying, let's make it so that, yeah, maybe the installation is a little differently, but once you're set up and you have the installation and publish set up properly, the rest is going to be identical to Alpha. And in fact, there's an exciting new feature that was just added in this last, is being added right now that's going to be very powerful for everybody there. So the agenda is I want to do a little background work before we get into the actual hands-on piece. Specifically, what is IIS? What are some of the advantages of using IIS? What's the differences between our standalone server and the Alpha Anywhere server for IIS? Then we're going to go through the installation process, how that's done, how you configure different pieces, what are some common mistakes or common things that get missed. Then along with that, we'll show you how to publish it. Plus, then we're going to dive into security a little bit more because there are some nuances different in terms of how security works between the two. And again, that's more of just during the setup and publishing process. Once it's up, the rest is the same. We're also going to talk a little bit about monitoring, review it, and talk about what next steps are there. So we have a pretty packed agenda. Again, we are going to have 2 sessions, one that goes to about 50 minutes after the hour, then we connect back at the top of the hour and we continue it there, and we should be able to cover all of this in that time period. As always, very important for us is this training is geared to help you. So I'm going to go through it. If I go through something too fast or if it doesn't seem to make sense, please, by all means, jump on your GoToWebinar control panel, go to the questions area, and put in the questions. And Dave will be monitoring that to make sure if there's any questions during our process that you get that those answers are solved. If we can't do it within this session, we obviously will then take it back to our core developers and get that information to you. Also joining us is Sarah, who is our head of documentation for Alpha, and she'll be, obviously, as we go through it, if there's certain things, she'll be contributing through the chat area to throw out some links that you can use or record or pieces there, and also she can help me out in terms of if there's specific information that people have and it's in the documentation system. We always enjoy having Sarah online, and incredibly valuable, doing an amazing things for Alpha and for our developer community. Okay, so first let's do a little bit of background work. Let's talk a little bit about IIS. So what we're going to do is talk about the IIS advantages. And the IIS is basically a product from, it's a web server product from Microsoft. It's widely distributed, widely used. It's very powerful. And when you use IIS with Alpha, the combination of it, there are some distinct advantages over the standalone server. Again, both are very capable products, but IIS kind of adds a little bit more sort of special sauce to our regular capabilities. And those are in the area of load, security, automatic failover, and administration. So first, load. The IIS has a lot of capabilities that are brought to Alpha. In terms of, a little context is that when you deploy a Alpha standalone server and you put it on the server there, it's doing sort of 2 things. It's doing the generation and running of the Alpha application, XBasic, talking to the database, doing synchronization logic, all of these other things there. But the other thing too is it's serving up web pages. So if someone is hitting that Alpha application server and they're coming from a web browser, the Alpha application server is generating that web pages and then serving them up to the end client on their web browser. And so it's kind of doing double duty. Well, in the IIS world, Alpha will still generate the web page and also do all the XBasic and other pieces there. But what's nice is the IIS environment will take care of responding to requests and serving up those pages. And there's a lot of really very powerful caching techniques and other things that IIS has been built into it because it's really built for large-scale applications and websites. So one of the advantages of load is that we actually find that IIS is going to provide you a much more capability to have higher loading on a single server. And what's also nice about setting up that load is that IIS has a lot of built-in techniques to build farms and other things. So when you really start scaling it up, and what's kind of neat about this is we're going to be doing a Alpha certification on the Alpha Cloud, which is our new cloud offering. And one of the key things, one of the decisions is that actually we are using the IIS infrastructure with Alpha on the Alpha Cloud because we can really ensure load capabilities and other things there. So one of the key advantages is that you're going to get better loading on the Alpha IIS implementation versus a standalone, and there's a lot of other cool features that IIS provides you to kind of help you manage that load and do the pieces there. The other is security. The IIS provides some other security capabilities that the Alpha does not have built in. So a good example of that is Windows authentication. So for instance, we have some clients that are in the municipality area and they have installed IIS, and one of the cool things about it is that they're for internal applications, and those applications, the person logs onto their computer, and once they log onto their computer, when they go hit the website on IIS, IIS is able to detect who that person is from a Windows authentication basis and pass that along to Alpha. So therefore, in that particular situation, they don't have to log in again to get access to the Alpha application. And there's a whole bunch of other kind of security things that are built into IIS that really make it easy. You can integrate it with what are called service providers. We're going to talk a little bit more detail about that later. But that's one of the key advantages with IIS, is it opens up some more security capabilities that aren't available in the native one, even though the native Alpha standalone server has a huge amount of connections into security systems. So that's the second advantage. The other is automatic failover. The way IIS server is set up is you can have a pool of servers working together. And IIS, not Alpha, but IIS watches that environment, and if one of the nodes has a problem, then it's going to redirect traffic. So there's a lot of built-in sort of redundancy and failover built into IIS that allows you to create a more stable, a more reliable environment, and that's something that comes along with IIS. In fact, again, back to the Alpha Cloud, is that you'll find out when you go through certification on there, is that when we build a Alpha Cloud instance, we actually spin up 2 virtual machines and set them up so that they have failover automatically built into them, because that's going to be a very high availability, high traffic solution. So we're taking advantage of these IIS facilities to be able to do that. So automatic failures, or failover, not automatic failure, that's not a feature of ours. I want to be very clear on that. Automatic failover is the other one that's built into it. And then administration. One thing that's nice on IIS is that it's got a lot of built-in administration functions to say, hey, host multiple domains and set up multiple domains with different versions of the Alpha server installed. So there's some really nice little capabilities that are within the IIS administration that you can take advantage of when you deploy Alpha in the IIS environment. That's going to make you allow you to do it. And the nice thing is you don't need to have multiple IP addresses for each site. You can basically spin up these sites, and IIS is going to redirect the traffic as needed. So for people who are putting together, say, where they're going to have multiple sites supporting their different types of customers, then it may simplify their management of that and allow IIS to handle that versus setting up separate servers and doing a lot of other pieces are there. So those are the 4 advantages there: loading, security, automatic failover, and administration. And again, these are all enhancements over our standalone server. Specifically, you can set up these same kind of scenarios in it, but with IIS it's just a little easier to do so, and it also provides you the power of IIS to handle things that go with it. And again, Alpha offers us the application server for IIS. If you develop code on the application server, it's going to run solutions are going to run just fine on IIS versus with the application server for IIS. So the nice thing about it is that if you're doing local, then you're in a situation where you can do it all local with a standalone one, and then you have your production in IIS. We're not going to operate differently between that there. And just to kind of show you is right now, if you had a standalone Alpha application server, basically you have a Windows server. You install the application server on top of that Windows server, and then this application server then can monitor a port, and then your clients in the field, whether they be web or mobile, etc., are going to connect directly to the Alpha application server to communicate and to be able to deliver the application. In the situation with IIS, what's going on, very similar. We've installed the Windows server, but what we've done is instead of installing Alpha IIS directly on it, we actually have installed IIS, which we'll show you, and then we have installed the Alpha Anywhere Application Server plugin. So it actually plugs into the IIS environment. And then IIS is actually doing the communication with the end device, whether it's mobile or if it's a web-based solution. And therefore, then when the incoming traffic comes in to IIS, IIS recognizes that and says, oh, Alpha needs to handle this. They send it over to Alpha, and then Alpha does its thing, sends it back to IIS, and then IIS delivers the content back to the end user. So we're kind of piggybacking on all of the incredible amount of horsepower that IIS has. I mean, the nice thing about it is IIS has a very large development team, has a very large company, Microsoft, behind it. They're continually enhancing and improving it, handling security things, doing a whole lot of really nice things about it. And there's a lot of environments out there that have on IIS. So if you're deploying a solution into a company that is standardized on it, it's going to be easier with their IT staff to have it installed, because they go, oh great, you're a plugin for IIS, great. I'm not installing a separate new standalone thing I have to handle. I know how to handle and control apps within IIS. That makes them very happy. So that's the structure there from that standpoint there. Okay. So again, we're going to talk more about the Alpha Cloud in the future, but Alpha Cloud has chosen from an architectural standpoint to build on top of AWS with IIS. It takes away a lot of the pain of configuring and everything, setting it up. And the nice thing about it is that it gets all the benefits of doing an IIS deployment, failover, redundancy, speed, etc. And but we kind of do all of the, call it DevOps for you, and we'll have more details on that in the near future. That's pretty good. Some of the pros just using IIS, you know, beyond that is you got all the horsepower, scalability. Also, there are other third-party plugins that go into IIS. So an example of that is what I consider it sort of a leveraged investment. An example of that is we had a client, we did an integration with Shibboleth, which is a third-party open source security module. And what we were able to do, which is really nice, is we could actually install Shibboleth as a plugin into IIS. Therefore, it became the gatekeeper to the Alpha application, and then therefore we could simplify things and leverage existing code. So there's a lot of nice little pros on there. The only con that I've really found with the IIS, just to be upfront, is that the installation is a bit more involved, meaning that there's a few more steps to go through and configure IIS, and also a little different nomenclature on certain things. But once you got a handle on that, it's really not much more than doing a standalone scenario. So there's really not a matter of a lot of cons. It's just a matter of understanding how IIS work and goes from there. Pretty good. So this is what we're going to go through the process today. So there's two parts to this. First is, how do I set up a server, install Alpha on that IIS service, and then more importantly, how do I configure it so everything's going to work fine? So the proper process is, first, install IIS. Now the beauty of that is that when you go with hosting environments, if it's your own machine, you'll be able to do it, and it's a standard built-in. You basically go into, I'm not going to go through that part because there's so much documentation on installing and configuring IIS as a platform. It's out there. It's built into Windows. So basically you say, oh, I want to turn it on. Boom, it turns on and it's available there. But once you, and also if you engage with ZebraHost or other companies like that, you can actually ask them when you set up your VPS or your environment, go ahead and install IIS and have that activated on port 8 for me. Boom, you're good to go. They're going to handle all that for you. Now, once you have IIS installed, we need to install Alpha, and that's a very straightforward point and click, and I'm going to show you all this. Then you need to license that, because Alpha has a specific license, so that it knows that it's a legitimate piece there. You need to verify the IIS management service, and we're going to go in more details on what that does there. And we need to verify a few other things on settings there, and then add also something called the web deploy installation. So as you can see, there's sort of a series of steps, and we're going to go through each one of those to make sure that you have the knowledge on how to do this cleanly. But beyond that, once you've gone through this, then the rest of the Alpha stuff moves along pretty easily from there. So let's see. So what I'm going to go through now is we're going to ship over or switch over. I'm going to actually launch my virtual machine, which is on a ZebraHost server there, and I'm going to walk you through the installation process there. And then at that point, we're going to then come back and do the publishing stuff. My guess is we'll get into publishing after the break because I want to take the time to explain a few different pieces there and make sure you've captured the different elements there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and launch my remote capability. So in this case, I'm using a remote RDP. Well, before I do that, let me do a quick checkpoint real quick. It's 18 after the hour. Do you have any kind of questions or anything that have popped up, Dave, or we have so far? Or
I don't see any questions so far, but feel free to ask questions by typing them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. Thanks.
Dynamite. So I've got my IIS certification virtual machine. So I'm going to go ahead and launch in there. And basically I'm connecting to that. So in my screen now, and Dave, make sure it's coming through okay and you're able to see it, is that Now
Yep.
I'm looking at, oh, good. I'm looking at my server that's, I think, up in Dallas or something like that. Okay. So it's a Windows server. Oops, sorry, I'm adjusting my sharing screen there. I'm using 2012. It will work on 2008, but up to you to determine is best for yours. I like 2012's interface. It tends to be a pretty simple interface and way to go. So when you install in there, the first step again, as we talked about, is IIS, which has already been installed in IIS. And once you've done that, you will see that there's the Internet Information Services Manager. And the manager is how you interact. It's your dashboard into IIS. And one of the key things that's different between the standalone is that after we've done the installation process, all of the management of the Alpha Anywhere IIS plugin is done through the IIS Information Services dashboard. And so therefore, we're kind of using Microsoft's interface. And again, that's one of the benefits for companies that are already IIS-centric or use that. The IT staff is going to be, yeah, they know how to do that stuff. They just need to know these specific installation pieces in there. Now, so the assumption I'm making is that IIS has been installed. You can just go to here and type in IIS in the search area there, and what will come up is the Internet Information Services Manager. So I'll go ahead and open up there. So this is called the IIS Manager. And again, I apologize if anybody else has already done a lot of work with IIS. You're probably like, well, you're telling me what I already know. But there are people that are on this training course who have never done anything with IIS. They're kind of starting out from scratch. So I'm kind of walking through these core pieces so there's no confusion. So again, once you have installed it, you want to launch IIS Information Server. And in fact, what I've done is I've pinned it to my start bar on my server so that I can quickly get to it whenever I want to. I just click on there and it pops up from there. Now IIS can have multiple servers running. In this case, you'll notice that when it got installed, there is a single server that was installed here. So what I'm doing is clicking on here. Ignore these for now, pretend those aren't there. When you do first see it, you're going to see all of these items down here. These are all the areas that you can install or interact with it. These two won't be present, and I'll show you how to get that in a few moments here. So you'll see down here that in here you're going to have a whole bunch of control pieces. And again, there's tons of documentation on how they do it. And there's about 3 or 4 of them that we're going to cover in this training that are important for configuring and setting up Alpha. So it's a little noisy to begin with, but when you do a filter up top here, you can top like Alpha and it only brings you up things like that. Or like, let's say I want to look for logs, so I can go to logs and it has the login information here. I can go to, let's say it's FTP, I'm setting up FTP stuff. So that's an easy way to kind of sort through it there. But all of these buttons are all going to be the same. And again, there's tons of Yahoo videos and books and things like that. You will not see these two pieces right here because those aren't installed until you install Alpha. But again, you launch IIS dashboard. You then will see a server here. You can obviously set up more than one server depending on your environment. And you'll see that if I click on the server, I get to the server here. And then you're going to see down here that below here you have what are called application pools, but here is something called sites. And we're going to come back and talk about sites a little bit later. It's a key concept of how Alpha is deployed and how IIS works. But this is essentially a website here. And in this case, it happens to be one that I've already published that I'm going to walk you through. But you could also have HTML sites that are pure HTML, etc. But the nice thing is we set all this up so you're good to go. Now this one has been put on port 80. So I'm going to go back here real quick and let me edit this. Excuse me. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and go into this is my development environment, where I'm going to show you the publishing and the other pieces about that in a little bit once we have it installed. But I wanted to go ahead and show you that, go ahead and do this here. It's open. I'm just opening up a Chrome browser. And as it goes. Okay. So that's the IP address of my server here. And as all servers, I could put in port 80 tell it using port 80, but that is the default. So I'll go like this. And so I can hit that server. And if IIS is installed properly, it's going to actually show me a login page because I've already got that. Well, let me see. Let's see what happens when he goes there. Through my testing and getting ready for the certification class. Come on. That is not the server being slow. That is my machine here locally being slow because I'm on a webinar, and of course it has to slow down on that. And it's mainly my ad block, things like that, is doing some things here. Okay, and it's almost there. Okay, so you'll see here, you normally won't see this because I have already published a site to this server, but in a generic IIS environment, and again, we'll wait till this comes up here, you'll see that I have, it's coming up to an alpha solution. But if you have a plain vanilla one, you would see an IIS splash page where all it would show would be IIS, because before you go through and install all the pieces, it's just going to throw up a static web page saying welcome to IIS, and that's all it does there. But that's my server address right here. And the other thing that's important is when IIS is initially installed, it's on port 80 because that's the default HTTP port. Of course, you can change that at any time. Things up differently. That's all within the IIS realm. So I'm in my IIS piece here. I'm going to go ahead and start the installation process. So first step is to go to our download page. So let me go here, and I'm going to go to my Alpha Anywhere Updates page. And it's going to load up my standard Alpha Updates page. That's also reachable within the development environment from the help system. You can check for you can download patches, etc. I'm just going directly to the site. And so the first thing I need to do is, if it's a first time install, I have to download the Alpha Anywhere application server for IIS full install. So when I click that, it just downloads a installation, an MSI file that's ready to go. And that should be done on the server because obviously you're going to run the installation on the server itself. So you can open up this web page on the server and then download, or you can download this full install and then use like your remote desktop to copy the file up to your server, or if you've, there's many different ways. But the idea behind it is that first step is to get the Alpha Anywhere application server for IIS full installation program, get it on your server. And you're going to notice that is sitting right here. And this looks a lot like all of our other installs with the little fancy blue box kind of scenario. So I double click on it once I've put it on my server.
That icon's looking a bit old nowadays. I don't know about those discs.
Yeah, it is looking a little dated there, kind of thing. So it's old school, baby. It's coming back. Okay, so I'm going to run this. And it's opening up my installation wizard. So this is going to say there, notice that this one is already watching, so it's going to say cancel install. So I'm going to ignore that for now. And so basically, since it's already been installed, it's saying, have to do that. You got to reboot after this. But I'm going to walk you through the steps here. So the first thing we're going to do is we have, my little welcome page. Click next. You then have your subscription agreement, which you will then need to agree to continue. So you click the agree button here, this little check or radio button. Click next. You can choose the folder. This is very similar where we put it in a folder on a file in the program files area. You can change that. It's up to you. It doesn't have to be here, but often just leave it standardized on those pieces here. Then of course we have a program manager group that is available there. And then you're ready to click, and you click next to install. I'm not going to do that because I already have it installed in here. But as you can see, the installation program is a standard click, 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 boom, and it runs. Now, what will happen is once it has run, then it's going to report back that it's successfully installed. If there's any errors, they're usually just in, like it couldn't copy a file, but haven't seen one in a long time, so you're good to go. So again, all you do is double click on that download MSI, run it, go through and answer the questions one after the other. Again, if you see this, you can say ignore reboot, and what would happen is after you installed IIS, you would reboot the machine and then it would put everything in the right place kind of scenario. But in this case, I'm just going to click ignore. And then I walk through these steps and off to the good there. Now, Once you have completed that, that's pretty exciting. You're not done yet. That's kind of the easy part. That's the straightforward part there. The next step we want to go to is the following, is that now that it is installed, everything else we do is through that IIS information manager. So as I showed before, you can click on the start menu here, click IIS. I would either pin it here to the start pane or to the bottom. And then once you launch that, it's going to launch it in here. Now you will see, if you didn't see it before, you're going to see these two different little icons here. One called Direct Publishing and one called License Information there. So these are the Alpha Anywhere plugins that are now on this server. So those will now appear, and we do everything we need to do in this environment here. So double click, run the installation program, reboot if necessary. Once you're rebooted, go ahead and go into the IIS information server environment, and you will now have your two Alpha items there. So that's a good sign. That means we've got the plugin in there, and so from an Alpha standpoint, the plugins are there. Now we got to go through some configuration steps, and actually, and this is part of the tricky part, is we need to also include a couple other pieces of software on there to make everything work the way we want it to work. So now that that's done and we have that, the first step we want you to take is go into the license information area here. So I'm going to double click on that, and you put in your license key here. Don't use mine because it expires in like 2 weeks. So you're welcome to, but guess what? 2 weeks from now it's going to stop. But basically you copy, and you'll get an email from Alpha that will have your license in it, and then you copy and paste it into here and then save it, and then it will allow you to do it. If you want to deactivate it, I would say deactivate it here and be able to do it from there. I accept the standard lease duration and everything else. I just put it in there and paste it. You're good to go there. And what that basically does is unlock Alpha on the system. So now it can use all the capabilities that it offers in Alpha. So you would paste it here. You'll notice in the right-hand side, and this is kind of a common paradigm in IIS, is that you make your adjustments. You select the item on the left, you make adjustments in the middle, and then you'll notice over here you have an apply and cancel. So let's say I went in here and I put in some other stuff and I go, ooh, bad. I can click cancel here, and any changes I have will be changed. Conversely, if I put some stuff in there and I want to apply it, I change it here and then click apply. So you're going to see that over and over within IIS, is that paradigm is modify here and then either click apply or whatever piece is there. Now we're going to do step number 2. And to explain it is that basically, let me go back to explain just real quickly how a little difference between how Alpha application server works when you deploy an application and how it works with the dashboard, or with IIS, is that when you are deploying an application, like if I go in here and I am doing a profile here, let's see, and let me go ahead and add a new profile real quick just so we can see what it is. And I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I want to go ahead and come back here. Normally what you do is you publish using FTP. So when you set up a normal publishing profile to go to an Alpha application server, the standalone version, basically all you're doing is copying a set of files from your local environment up to a folder on the application server. And the trick with that is that it's just a file copy, and you have to get the FTP set up, the security there, and off to the races. Then the Alpha application server can then read those files on there and go from there. So that's just standard how it goes from there. In the IIS world, it operates differently, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we go through the publishing process. But the way Alpha works is that instead of just copying it to a folder on the server, we actually call IIS and say, hey, IIS, here is a new application I want to deploy on you, and it's called Web Application Deployment. And so then we send the information to IIS, and then IIS generates the files, the folders, everything locally. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Reason number one is there's a security element to it. You just can't copy things into a folder. It allows IIS to control the environment. Secondly, IIS does a whole bunch of other setup stuff that it does to kind of configure and handle a lot of the more advanced features, like the ability to have multiple websites running on a single IP address and things like that. So again, that's a key differentiator, is instead of just copying a file set of FTP, we're doing that. And that's really the key difference in why we have to do some other setup stuff, because we need to configure IIS to get ready to receive that incoming information. So we have basically have to kind of prep IIS. Think of it as a pitcher and a catcher. So the alpha development environment is the pitcher and IIS is the catcher. It's going to catch the incoming request to create the environment, and it needs to have the proper equipment. It would be like, if I don't go through all these steps, if I just installed alpha in there, it'd be like the catcher was sitting behind the home plate with just his skivvies on. He doesn't have his pads, he doesn't have his glove, he doesn't have all of his protective gear, etc. And so it just is not going to work. I mean, that's even a bad analogy, because that catcher would not even have hands. You know, he can't even do anything there. So step one is licensing it. So the next steps we're going to go through is setting up IIS so all that catcher gear is installed and ready to go, so that Alpha can properly talk to IIS and submit it. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is called direct publishing. Now, direct publishing is a built-in feature of IIS. You have to actually add some items in to make it work, but we're going to go through and do that. So the next step we want to do is what's called direct publishing. Now, let me go ahead and remove this. When you first launch this, this is what it's going to look like. So basically what we need to do is specify what users and groups are allowed to publish to this environment. So basically you're setting up a security saying, if someone in their development machine calls into the IIS server, they have to have a certain set of permissions on the IIS server, or on the on the Windows server, to be able to do that. So I'm going to use the administrator one because that's what it was set up with. So I'm going to go ahead and go here. It's empty. I'm going to click Add User or Group. This opens up, and if you've done anything with Windows servers, it's kind of a standard kind of piece there. So I'm going to go ahead and click Advanced, and in here I'm just going to click, then after I click Advanced, Find Now. Now I could go in here and refine this search, but basically what this is showing me down below are all the different groups that are available, all the security users, groups, and built-in security protocols that are available. Because what we're going to be doing is saying, basically, what's nice about this is that we're setting up who has rights to talk to Alpha on the IIS server. Very important on there is that allows you the ability to create different groups and give them to different people, and limit who can do stuff on Alpha in there. Now in this case I'm going to use administrators. So let me go back through that. Let me go, Advanced, Find Now. So basically I have a single account that I log in here using administrators. So I'm going to allow the administrators who have rights on the server to be able to click to access that. And I click OK. And now you'll notice that my Select Users or Groups dialog box has that group, and then I could add individual users to that group. And that's all standard management of a Windows server kind of scenario. And I click OK, and administrators there. Actually, you know what? I had a different one here. Let me find the one that I want to make sure it's exactly what I did. It's administrator. Okay. And you'll notice then it's basically putting in the server name and administrator. That's what I had before there. And that's what, when like in this case with ZebraHost, these are the credentials that were given to be able to log into the machine. So I'm using those for direct publishing. So step one is licensing the server. Step two now is for doing there. You'll notice the one paradigm is different is that I don't have to apply it. Once you actually select and add the user, it's kind of applied. So I guess we break that paradigm a little bit there, but that's how it goes there. And again, you can have multiple different groups that you want to have allowed. You can limit it, and that's all handled through Windows security from that standpoint there. So go back to my start point. Go ahead and set up your application server. Go into direct publishing. This will be empty. add user or group, a safe bet is administrator, because if I logged into this machine with an administrator login, I know that that's going to work and connect properly from there. But if you miss this, and we can demonstrate it later on, if you miss this, you'll get an error because Alpha Development System will call the IIS server and say, hey, guess what? I got a bunch of stuff I want to put on there. And they'll go, oh, sorry, we don't know who you are. You're shut down. You can't come in. So this one's an important thing that you make sure this is done. Once it's done, you're good to go from then on. All the other configuration can be done on the dev side. But make sure that you have set up your direct publishing capabilities within there. And that's all the races. And again, your specific, and just this is very important, you may have something that looks a little differently than this. So this is for my particular server environment. Yours is going to be depending on the protocol that's installed from that stand from there. Okay, so we've gone through step 1 and 2, actually 3, install the plugin, set up my licensing, and direct publish. Now, we have a next step, and again, I hope the catcher metaphor is acceptable to everybody. But so in that case, okay, so the catcher now knows the pitcher. Like, okay, yeah, I'll accept catches from this guy up on the mountain. Now I got to start I have to equip IIS to be able to receive that contract or that information. And the first thing we need is what we call get new web components. Now, I have already installed it here, but very important is that when you start your IIS, what's going to happen is it's going to say, do you want this piece of software? It's called new web platform components. The idea behind it is that IIS has its own kind of installation capability where you can put in a plugin into IIS and then select the items there. And to find that, let me go ahead and go back out, so we'll do it from the very top level. I'm going to get the web platform installer for IIS. Okay. Okay. There. Okay. So, and let me go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to go over into the. Bear with me. I'm jumping back so I can put in to the chat window. Paste this. Okay. So, what this piece of software does is that it's sort of a step 1 to step 2. We actually have to install a specific item into IIS in order to work with it. But before I can do that, I first want to install this Microsoft Web Publisher 5.0. And the reason when you do that is then once you've done that, then you're going to get this neat little new icon item that then makes it easy for me to install other things into IIS. And the way you do this is all you have to do is once you go here, you click on that. It will download it to your local machine here. It's a free download. There's no extra charge for it. Save the file. So what that has done is now I'm going to go ahead and show it in my folder here. So much like you installed there, and I'll go ahead and put this on the desktop so we can see it there. Okay. So step 2, or step, well, I guess I'm going to stop talking what step number it is, but you need to download this web platform installer. And now that you do that, you can just launch it by double-clicking on it. Click Run. It's going to go through its standard installation. It does everything for you, and all it's doing is putting a piece of software in IIS that allows you to do that from there. Now notice it's launching this because I already have it installed on mine, but in that case, once you've gone through the initial installation, you're going to see this get new web platform components. And now you'll notice that now that I've downloaded and installed it, now you'll see when I click on this, I go immediately to the products that are available. And so think of this as sort of an IIS app store where you can see all the different products that are available, things that you can put into IIS from there, including applications. So if I wanted to add a .NET CMS into my IIS, I could do that. Not recommended. Alpha is much better on that. So those kind of pieces there. So I have installed the web platform installer. Once you do that, you will now be able to click from it here, and it opens up this here. So now that I have the installer, I actually want to install the piece of software I'm very interested in getting. And so that piece of software is called, I'm pulling up, I want to make sure there, Web Deploy, okay? And I'm going to type, I'm jumping back and forth because I want to put in here and write it in here, web deploy. Okay, so now that I've got my installer set up, I'm going to go ahead and type in here web deploy. And I'm going to search for it. And you'll notice, you'll see that there's a web deploy. And the one we want is 3.5. They actually have a newer one, 3.6. I think, yeah, I must have installed that one there. But and Sarah, you might want to clarify for me if it's 3.5 or 3.6. But you're looking, I look for the 3.5 one is what I did on here. I guess I might have installed 3.6. But what you're looking for is called web deploy. And what web deploy is another plugin that gets installed into IIS that is basically the catcher's mitt that then will interact and talk with the Alpha development environment. So there's sort of a step before a step, which is first install, run and install the web platform installer. Then that will then allow you to easily, otherwise, yeah, you know, this automates all those pieces there. Now you'll notice mine is saying installed. So what I'm actually able to do now is I click a add button here, and what it will do is automatically go through and install that. So in your scenario, when you launch web deploy or web platform installer and type web deploy, what will happen is you're going to see this and you're going to say, and you're going to click here and you're going to say add because it is not installed. And right now I'd say 3.5 unless Sarah contradicts me, that will do there. Now once that goes through, like you'll see, let me throw up an example. Let me just grab something else real quick. I'm very careful. I don't want to muck up my environment. But if you click add, oh, okay, yep, that's, I wanted to show that, is that once you click add on web deploy, you're going to see down here, this turns to say installed. Yes, Sarah is saying 3.5 is what you want. So when you click on 3.5 and then click add, you're going to see now it's going to change to remove and it's going to say install. And then all you have to do is click install. And then once that install occurs, you're going to see it's going to throw up a couple messages like a standard installation. And much like Alpha, you just say yes, 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 yes. And what will happen is it will now install web deploy 3.5 into IIS. And I apologize, I can't actually show the screens, but the reality is once you click add, install, you just accept the items. It's going to tell you what prerequisites there are for web deploy. All of them are already met. Then you just step through and you'll see it install the stuff. What's kind of cool is there's no reboot required. Once you've installed it, it just gets plugged into IIS. You don't actually have to restart IIS or you don't have to restart Windows. It's just going to be in there. So install the web deploy, web platform installer, launch it, find web deploy 3.5, and that can be done through the search part right here. Deploy. And then select web deploy, click add, and then click install, follow the steps, you're good to go. Now, once that's done, I can type up in here, you'll see that we now have a new piece in here called the web management service. Oh, let me double check this real quick, wait a second. Yep, let's see. I'm double checking. I want to make sure. Yep, web deploy. And this is what it's installing, is called the management service. And that is what's important. And that's the catcher. That is what is really critical on here, because that is the piece of software, essentially consider it a plugin, that actually Alpha will talk to and go through there. So you'll know that, oh, go ahead.
Let's see if I get this straight. So you've installed web deploy, but what it appears as is a icon called management service in the management section of IIS.
That's why it's so crystal clear.
It doesn't show up as web deploy. So
yeah, so if I type up here web deploy,
it's not going to find anything. Okay. So that totally seems like a gotcha. Okay, good. I'm glad you went over that again then. Thanks.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. And if I miss anything, guys, let me know. As you can see, and you'll have this video to go back through, there are some nomenclature things that are kind of like, wait, it should say web deploy has been installed. It's actually called management server. And I don't know. That's an alpha. That's not an alpha thing. Web deploy and management server. But I'm thinking it installs a couple other things in there, and this just happens to be the most important part that we care about. That's not an alpha thing. Web deploy and management server. But I'm thinking it installs a couple other things in there, and this just happens to be the most important part that we care about. Okay, we got 1 more minute before our break. So what I want to do next is I want to show you real quick. You know what? Let's break right now, and we're going to be able, we're going to move quickly. We're going to finish our installation program, update it so it can connect, and then we're going to jump into publishing right after that. So another 5 minutes for doing the installation process, and we'll go from there. So with that, we're going to break for 10 minutes sharp. We're going to start at the top of the hour, so be back in your seats. And if there's any questions that come up in between, please put them in the question box, and then we'll address them right after the break.
Sounds great. We'll see you guys back here in 10 minutes. All right, it is 2 o'clock Eastern Time, and we are back. Hello, Dion. Are you back as well?
Yes, I am. I was going to make you sweat, but I said, no. I thought that would just be mean. Cool. Welcome back. On time, off to the races. Okay. So, as we so eloquently said, install web deploy to get management service. Makes perfect sense, but that's how it works. And then once you've done that, management service is essentially the equipment for the catcher to be able to catch the incoming traffic. So we click on here, okay? You'll notice that it has its own start, restart, etc. So it's running, but let's go ahead and open that up and look at it. And let's look at the situation right here. So basically you can use the standard kind of information in here. Basically use the default, meaning don't go ahead and, you don't have to make any adjustments to this, but I'm going to walk you through it here. If you're in an environment that uses Windows credentials, you can just say only people, like if they're on the site, the IIS. But what we're doing here is Windows credentials and IIS manager credentials. So we leave that as it is. But the thing I want to draw your attention to is you'll notice that the connection says port 8172. And this is the standard port that when you install the management service in there is set up. And the idea is that, for instance, if you install a SQL database or MySQL, they put standard ports like 3306 or whatever it happens to be. And the idea is the software is going to sit there and look at that port and watch the traffic that's coming into it. So in this case, what will happen is the management service plugin will be watching port 8172 for any incoming traffic and handle it from there. You can change that, but Alpha kind of assumes, and our default is 8172. But that said, you're not limited to just that from there. Now, if you do change anything over here, you must restart the management service because it's a separate process that's basically listening to that port and then will communicate the incoming information over to IIS. And all you have to do is click restart, and that will restart. You'll see little signs there, and basically it's stopping the management service and restopping. If you want to stop it, you can click stop, and it just won't accept any traffic there. So again, the way I got there was just double-clicked on, go to the bottom, find management service, double-click on it. Again, these are the defaults, which you can leave, they work fine, and then it's port 8172, and that's what you need to know there. Now, we have one other little thing that needs to be done. So we've set up the catcher. The catcher's looking good. He's behind the plate. He's got his equipment. He's got everything ready to go. But what we're missing is something. This port, this management service here is listening to that port, but Windows Server by default locks down all ports, meaning it doesn't allow traffic in it. So think of it as someone standing on home plate and just sitting there. In fact, the umpire is saying, hey, you can't do anything. I'm not going to let you pitch down here. So what we need to do is we need to now go into the Windows environment and set that up so that the incoming traffic will come in. And that's why, some of the IIS things is just making sure all these things are set up so you don't have a problem there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and go to the Windows Start, and I'm going to type in the word firewall. And let me shrink this so I can see it better on here. And if I could type, that would be Okay, so you'll notice that we're going to now go to what's called Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. So we're going to open up that program. So that's a different program from IIS. Is basically we're going to open that up, and then we're going to go in here. And so this is a standards Windows program, and basically it allows you to tell what ports are open and what are not. And the way they do it is through something called rules. So you have inbound rules and outbound rules. So you can create different inbound and outbound rules that dictate how this server will interact with the outside world. And when you install Windows Server to begin with, a lot of this is set automatically for standard security protocol. So in this case, what happens is when you install it, by default, it's going to block that port traffic 8172, which is bad. It won't allow us to work here. So what we want to do is once we've gone to Windows Firewall, you can go to inbound rules, because this is talking about incoming traffic. I've already created one, but I'm going to go ahead and show you how to create basically a rule that says go ahead and allow traffic on port 8172 to come in. And there's also something I want to explain to make it more secure. So I'm going to go ahead and go to inbound rules. I'm going to click new rule. That allows me to create a new rule, and nicely they have a very nice kind of walkthrough there. So what kind of rule would you like to create? Is it a rule about a program on here, a port predefined? Obviously we want to talk about port. So what I want to do is set a rule that is in regard to port. I'm going to click next. Is this TCP or UDP? And it's also asking all local ports or specific port. In this case, this is TCP traffic, and I'm talking about port 1872. Is that right? Like that? Oh, 8172. That might be important to do right. 8172. Okay. So basically I'm saying I'm creating a rule that is for any incoming traffic, TCP traffic, on port 8172. Now I can say block the connection, allow the connection. There's different ways to do it. The one I want is allow the connection because I want that traffic to come in. Now what this is, I just use these. Is it private, public, or domain? I'm just going to leave those all defaulted. And then you give it a name. And so I usually call this port 80, was it? God, how fast there? 8172 traffic, or Alpha web port or something, whatever you want to call it there. Now once you've done that and saved it, you will now see you have a new rule in your inbound rules, and that's why I did that, and it basically has enabled it there. So once you've done that, that rule now is in the system. So in this case, what I've done is said, hey, go ahead and allow incoming traffic on port 8172. If I hadn't done that, then even if this was listening for the traffic, it would never see it because Windows would block that traffic before it got in the door. And then if you want to, you can always double click on a rule, and then you can change some things in there. One of the nice things you can do is you can lock down this rule saying only allow certain TCP IP addresses. So when that traffic comes in on 8172, it's actually going to say, hey, I'm from IP address XYZ. So if you wanted to, you could essentially whitelist your own traffic so you kind of increase your security, meaning that not anybody can hit that port 8172. They still would need the credentials is set up by our direct publishing, as we talked about earlier. But again, something where if you really want a very secure environment, you can put on firewall rules specific IP addresses that are allowed to use this. And so you can do this. In this case, I have it no whatever because I've been moving around to different machines. Okay. So we installed the IIS, so we're in great shape. We're looking good. We've got a fully configured setup. Make sure there's no other steps to make sure we're good there. Select profiles. Okay. Yep. So we've set. So that's how to set up there. And as you can see, once you kind of know it, it's probably about a 10-minute procedure, but I want to make sure we go through it. Step 1, install IIS. Step 2, install the Alpha application server for IIS. That will install and put in these 2 different buttons right here. Step 3, put in your licensing information, type it in, make sure it's good, apply it. Step 4, go into direct publishing. tell who can then connect to Alpha there. This kind of work, this is, in this case, this is a account on the local system here, administrator, okay? Next step is if you haven't gotten the web platform installer, get that, and that's just on that web address from that I sent you here. Install that, and once you install that, I can now use the installer to find my web deploy. So we want to, it's sort of a step to a step. We want to go ahead and get to web deploy 5.2. Actually, it's 5.4. No. Let me just deploy. Make sure it's there. It's 3.5. So you put in web deploy 3.5. Click the add button and then click install. Walk through the installation procedure. Once you've done that, it installs the nicely named management service. Once that management service has been installed, it's going to default to port 8172, which by all means, please use that. Feel free if you want to. By the way, you can also suppress inside here specific IP addresses too. So you don't even need to do that on the firewall if you want, but I do it on the firewall if I'm going to do that to make it a little safer there. So now we have port 8172 set up. Again, this is now listening to that port, but the server by default will not allow you to go in there. So now I launch the Windows Firewall tool. I create an inbound rule for that port, specifically walk through the step-by-step saying it's a TCP IP or TCP for port 8172 that I'm going to allow traffic to come into. Click OK. Now you've got all the pieces set up. So we now have everything configured on the server side, and now we can go over to the Alpha development environment and set up our publishing profile to publish to that server, sort of the pitcher side of the game there. So before I do that, are there any questions or other pieces in terms of what we're going to do next on the server side export or setup procedure? Okay. I guess not. So that's cool. That's good. So, oh, great. No, I mean, not a bad thing here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to go ahead and new project, and I'll call it, okay, so I can set up here. Okay. So I've now gone into Alpha Anywhere. So I'm now inside Alpha Anywhere. And basically, I don't have anything set up, so I'm ready to go ahead and set it up. To test my publishing to the IIS server is the following, is what I want to do is just to test it, I like to take things in little baby steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to A5W pages, and I'm just going to create a simple A5W page that I want to publish to the server. And so I'm just opening up and creating, and I click in my development environment, A5W page. I click new, and then I'm just going to go, hello class. Hello class. Welcome to my IIS server. Okay. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to save that as index because I want that to be the index page. So I now have one simple page, and this is just to help me verify that my publishing is working correctly. Everything else I walk before I run. So now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a publishing profile to be able to send that to the server. And it actually, I could do a live preview right here, and you'll see not very exciting other than hello class, there it is. Okay. So now I'm going to go to my profiles here. And it's got my default one, but I want to create a new profile because this is going to be my IIS publishing profile. So I'm going to go ahead and click Add New Profile. In this case, I'm going to select a very special one called IIS. So normally I would be doing with the standalone ISP remote, but I'm doing IIS. And I click Next. Okay. It's going to ask me the type of profile. Right now it's currently direct. Now, this is the management service, and this is where, remember, on the server when we installed after web deploy on port 8172 is a service there. So it's asking me actually where that location is, okay? So let me go ahead and get that out real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my server address. So in this case, it's 162.247.129.207. Okay, and actually I can go into my browser and see it's 162.247.129.207. Now, if you had a domain name, it could be, you know, mycoolserver.com, etc. But in this case, I'm using the direct IP address. Now, you'll notice there's a little comment down below where it says specify the URL. If it will default and add the 8172 stuff for you, but if you need a different port, or like if you've set up 8172 on something else, then you do something differently from there. So, okay. So, and local administrator, okay. So what we've done there is we've said, okay, where are we going to direct publish to, which is the IP address of our thing, and since we're using 8172. Next, what I want to do is, do I want to use integrated Windows authentication? Well, the problem is I'm outside the network, so I technically can't use Windows authentication. So I need to use a local administrator account on the server. And remember, on the server, we set up saying, here's that administrator account. So that's the one I'm going to use here. So I'm going to go ahead and type administrator. And again, I'm going to go ahead and put the password in there. Let's see. Bear with me as I put that in there. Come on, wake up there. Bear with me. I'm going to pause here, go in here. Sorry, my machine just got a little real slow real quick for a second. There we go. Okay. I'm putting in my server bear with me, I'm copying it out of my notebook, so I'm going to copy it. Let's see. Copy that. I'm going to go ahead and paste it. And I'm going to paste it again. Okay. Now I'll let you see what's going on. Oh, it was on there for a minute. Oh, it moved it things. Okay, sorry for the little mix up there. So basically, instead of integrated Windows authentication, now again, if this server is on your local network and you've already logged into it, you can use that. But I'm using it because I'm outside. So I put in the username, and then I put in my password, in this case, my administrator password, to allow me to log on to that machine. Now notice, really important right below it, ignore HTTPS certificate errors. It's not recommended in production, but in this case I don't have HTTP set up for my server, so I'm clicking that to install that. And that's important because it will get rid of an error message last night. So you put in the IIS service URL, the administrator information, the password, and the name and the password, and they have to match. And then also click ignore HTTPS certificate errors. Now, obviously, when you put together your profile to do your production is going to have IIS. With a HTTPS, you're going to have a certificate. Everything's going to be okay. You don't have to ignore that. But that's what we're going to do this for this purposes right here. Now, we have what's called default website and the application name. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about that. But for your first one, I'm just putting in default website and I'm keeping it empty because there's no application. Websites can have multiple applications below them. It's kind of an IIS thing, but in our case, we only have one site we're putting up, which is at the root, so I'm just calling it default website. And then there's some advanced settings that you can do, for instance, custom physical paths, etc. But for now, that's all I want you to do is put in default website and then make the application name empty. And that's for our little test page site. So I'm going to click next. I can do my application pool. I would set the standards down the road when you start tuning your environment. You may change these up a little bit. And then the number of processes, and this goes to that loading piece. What's cool is IIS will spin up processes as it needs it. So you can set the default value of how many processes, but if you have a hardcore situation where you're doing like a lot of reports or something, you can make that increase. And again, that's all part of the tuning part of using IIS from there. Okay, so Alpha Anywhere Application Server Location. Now this is kind of cool, and this is another reason Alpha App IIS is really cool. Right now I'm saying default, so I'm saying when I installed the app server, I just have it in default. But what's cool on the IIS, and we don't show it in this training, is you can actually have multiple versions of Alpha Anywhere running on that IIS server, different builds. So you could have the 4.43, you could have the 4.44 or 4.45, and in here I can target a specific build. And when we cover Alpha Cloud down the road, one of the cool things about Alpha Cloud is that it actually has all of our builds that are available because it does that behind the scenes. It's kind of neat there. But in our case, let's kick default because it's just going to be whatever we installed on the server there. Okay? Now, we're going to come back and talk about session store state. I'm going to keep it as local state server, but when we come back in a few minutes and talk about some things like security, we're going to be talking about how we can use SQL Server, MySQL, etc. But for now, we're going to keep it as local state series. So once I've done that, I click Finish. I'm going to call this IIS Server Certification Server. Click OK. And now I have my new there. Now, I can go through and adjust all this. You're going to see things like the named alpha DAO connection strings. You'll see a lot of this is similar to when you're doing the standard. Again, we want to keep it there. But down, notice if I scroll down a little bit here, this is where we basically set up things like we want to do direct. It's called default site, and the application name is something else. We're using a private application pool. Here's the service URL. You'll notice that we're not using integrated. Here's my login and all those pieces there. So basically by doing that, it goes through and sets up all of these pieces here. Now that we've done the setup for that, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now it's asking me, do I want to edit? And I'm going to go, I will edit them later because I don't actually use DAO connection strings for this particular demo because all it is a static web page. So that's what I've done. I've set up my new profile. If I never need to edit, I click Profiles. It's right here. And I'm ready to give it a test. So I'm going to click Publish. I'm going to select IIS Certification Server. You'll see something kind of interesting. It's actually a very minimal setup because everything is done inside the profile. So it's like once you've done that, they're like, okay, great. And then what I can now do is click Publish. And if I've done everything correctly, we'll see the results in a moment. You'll see much like it's grabbing all the files out of my current system. It is now calling the server. It's going really fast, but we're going to break it in a few moments and show a couple things. And so it's giving you, it said it called the service, it's creating the site and application pool, i.e. it's setting up the stuff on the service. So basically it handed all that stuff over to IIS. IIS is now doing all that stuff and setting it up on the server. So we're not actually copying the files directly into IIS, it's doing those pieces there. And now, if it's all good, you'll see, I have it turned off, but it would say deployment has been okay. So I had a successful deployment. So now I'm going to go here. I'm going to refresh and go to my, what I want to do is go to my home page. So I'm going to go to my IP address there and keep my fingers crossed. Check it out.
Ooh, well done.
Not bad, huh? Pretty cool. Again, I've been through this a few times. You're going to see errors, and I'm going to actually do something. I'm going to break the installation in a moment, show you what an error looks like. But before we do that, I want to go back in here. I'm going to go into my index page and check this out. I'm going to go ahead and insert some XBasic here. I'm going to say question mark, the time is now. Is space plus now. Okay. And I'm going to put right here a/br. Okay, so to prove that we're running alpha, because this is just plain HTML, although it's an A5W page, I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm going to do a publish to the certification server. Now, up to a week ago, this does what's called a full publish. This is fast because I only have one page in it, but Alpha now supports incremental publishing to IIS. Before, it would always publish the full set of files. Now it's smart enough to say what has changed and only publish the things. And you can see it's going through this. It's a little faster the next time around because everything's kind of set up. And now if I go on here, I can prove to you that it works, that actually this is static HTML and this is XBasic running on there. So what happens, and this goes back to how Alpha works on the server, go here to this, let's go here, go down to here. What's happening is that my web browser is calling IIS at that port and saying, hey, I'm going here. And then what it's doing is IIS says, oh, okay, that's a A5W page. I'm going to go call the application server plugin, let it handle it. Then it gives it back and it publishes it to the user. So in this situation, we can handle it. And so everything Alpha can do. Now, this is the cool thing. Once you're set up with that, and we're going to come back to security in a few moments, once you've set that up, it's all plain Alpha, meaning you use all the same techniques you use now. Database, XBasic, API calls, whatever you happen to be, it's the same. And that's what we find is it's just you have to do a certain sequence and you set things up. And then when you set up your publishing profile, it's important that you set up specific things. Like, for instance, this is very important that you, let me go here. The key things on the publishing profile that I really take the time to make sure is that my service URL is correct, my username and password is correct, and my I ignore HTTPS certificate. Like, let's show you some errors. Is that now? Before I do that, I want to show you some errors to kind of give you a feel for how you'll see errors come up. But before I do that, any questions on that?
Yeah, just one quick question, and it has to do with incremental publishing. So what version is incremental publishing available? Is that 4.4.5, or is that still in pre-release?
I think it's in pre-release. I think
pre-release.
It was,
okay.
Like literally last week, I think the developers released it into general test, and it's in pre-release.
Okay, so pre-release.
So I think the next one will be 4.4.6 or whatever the next anticipated full release. But nice is that we're doing it much faster.
All right.
But feel free. Cool. No, it's not. So I'm going to do this. Check this out. Uh-oh, I forgot to check my HTTPS certificate. So I'm going to do a publish here, IIS certificate, or I'm just going to publish it here. Now watch what happens. It does everything else, compiles all the files together, calls it, and check it out. This is where a lot of people get stumped because the errors they're a bit arcane, because what's happening is Alpha is sending this up to IIS, and then IIS is saying, hey, this is an error I found, and send it back to you. So you'll notice in here that this is the message we received back from IIS. So in this case, you'll see error certificate validation failed, meaning that it said, hey, I'm waiting for a certificate, but since I don't have one, it failed. So this is an example of an Alpha IIS error. And so that's where it throws some people off. It's pretty harsh. It's like a lot of information in there, but it's telling you on those pieces there. So again, to solve that, I saw the certificate area. I'm going to go to my profiles, go to here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ignore certificate areas, click OK, and let's do a quick publish. Now in this case, unless I've done something else stupid, it goes through there and it fails. And I go through these failures because I want you to see them before you see them yourself, so you know how to fix them really quick. Because by the way, every one of these errors I've gotten. Okay, so it published it up great. Now let's go ahead and make another error. I'm going to go into my profiles, I'm going to my certificate, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to change my username to administrator123. So that obviously user does not exist on the IIS server. So let's go ahead and do a publish now. I proved you only learn from your failures in developing this course content. So, okay,
we can learn from your failures, which is great.
Yes, exactly. Check it out. So the important thing to look at is right here. This is kind of telling you what. There's a lot of gobbledygook right here, blah, blah, blah. It does tell you what it's trying. It's calling my address 8170 MS deploy, handing it the username administrator123, and then it's saying, hey, wait, I've got an error, user unauthorized, meaning that that user is not permitted. So in this case, that user doesn't even exist, and the most common thing where I got that, just to let you know, is that when I went in and set this and did the install, I forgot to do this. So in fact, let me remove that. Let me go back in here. Let me go to my publishing profile, and let me go to here. I'm going to fix my thing here. So this is the correct username password, but I'm going to go ahead and do a publish and watch what happens. Oh, this should be throwing an error. Okay, wait, I think this is where it's going to throw. Ooh, interesting.
Did you remember
Maybe
to click
the administrator
apply?
by default, huh?
Wait a minute. Did you remember to click apply?
Okay, let me go here.
By the way, that wasn't my brilliant observation. Someone on the line here actually wrote that in, so take a look. No, it wasn't there. What I mean back.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, you do have to apply
That's
that.
how that gets you.
Yeah. So, good, failure. Chalk another one up.
Thank you, Vaughn, for that answer.
Thank you. Yeah, someone's watching. At least we know someone's watching, huh? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Good. See, this one seems a little more, it says administrator, again, very similar, saying an error occurred. So you have to kind of read through that. So I'm trying to show the most common there. I'm employing as my YouTube says, does not match destination. So that's not as clear as you have the wrong email or it's, kind of scenario. So that's the only other thing a little bit is that the standard IIS thing is there. But I'm showing you the most major problems that are there. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to click advanced, find now. I'm going to find my administrator. Okay. I'm going to apply. So now I have the proper person on there. So now I can click OK, just do a publish here and off to the races there. And that's mainly where I see the problems is that it's in that communication between Alpha and that management server that's talking there. Now I want to show you one other thing that's kind of cool and what actually got created on the server. Okay, so it worked fine. My server's up and running and looking good. Now notice something kind of interesting here. You don't see index.a5w on here. It's just showing it. So that's one of the other things that's cool about IIS is that, it can hide the A5Ws and stuff like that. Let's go ahead and here and let me go into my environment here. And I'm going to go to my profiles. And what I'd like to do, oh wait, before I do that, I want to go back to my server and I wanted to show you what's on the server now. So I'm going to go into my IIS server and you'll see in here that we have one site here called default website. And that default website was created by Alpha. And you'll notice that if I click on this and say explore, it's basically our stuff, our file stuff, but we didn't copy it there. IIS did that. And so that's the key difference. But you'll notice, hey, this looks just like plain vanilla. You got web config, A5W files, all those kind of things. Got a few other things thrown in there because it's IIS. So let's do something interesting. Now that we've got that default website, let's go back into Alpha. And I'm going to duplicate this profile. I'm going to call this IIS certification server site second site. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. And so everything is identical, but I'm going to do one other thing. Instead of default website, I'm going to add an application name called second site. Okay, actually I'll just call it second site. Okay, so everything's the same, but all I'm doing is taking my default website and changing the application name to be there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a publish. I'm going to publish it to that second site there, and I'm going to click publish. How are we doing on time? I got to get over to security in the next couple minutes. So it's going through. You'll notice that it's creating the site and application pool. So everything's working basically the same, but let's see what happens on the server when I do that. Okay, it's deploying there. And encrypting, boom, 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 deploying there. Okay, so now I'm going to go back into the server and I'm going to do here and I'm going to do a refresh and you'll see something. We have our default website, but now we have this other thing called second site, which is essentially the second there. So now if I go back into my browser, where's my browser? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around on everybody, I apologize. Okay, so I'm going back into my browser and I'm going to go in here and say second site, hit enter, you'll notice something, that it displayed the same thing, but you'll notice that this is the new address. So I redeployed, and so you can think of that application as like a subfolder on the primary site. You always have to have one primary site. That's an important thing to realize, is that IIS always has to have a primary site, which is default website with no application name. But now you could have third site, fourth site, etc., and you could be publishing to those different sites and other pieces there. And I just want to cover a little bit of what it goes there. Let's try this. Let's do something differently on there. So, yeah, well, that's all I wanted to cover on that. And so you'll see that you have your default website, but then now it creates almost like a second subfolder for that second site, and in there is all the information associated with it. And then if I explore it, you'll see that it's put it into web root. So you'll see there's a web root folder, second site. And actually you can right click on this, and actually let's click on second site, and we can say browse HTTP over here, and it actually launches the browser local one with that site in it. So that's how it goes there. So that's called site. So I'm not going to spend more time on that, but that's one of the powers, is that you can deploy multiple full-blown sites under one scenario very rapidly. So if you have a couple different sub-applications or things like that, the sky's the limit. Now, you'll also notice we have what's called default website. You can actually have multiple websites on here, and each website can have essentially its own port and redirect for you and stuff like that. It's really cool. It allows you basically to host multiple websites on an IIS server under the same IP address, and it handles all the redirection for you. And so I'm not going to go into that, it's a little more advanced, but Alpha IIS allows you to do that. So for instance, if you have like 5 clients and you want to have one server and support all those 5 clients, but each one gets a different sort of their own little website, so it's all particular to them, you can do so, and it's pretty straightforward there. But I want to move on, because one of the most other key areas people get confused is security. So let's talk a little bit about security. Okay, so let's go here and let's get started. Okay, so we've done publishing right there. Okay, so security configuration. It does work a little differently from the standalone, okay? So there's a concept on IIS called a security provider. Basically, IIS punches out and says, here's the username and password, here's the security provider. And there are multiple security providers that are available. And we're going to talk about 2 in particular today. Now, the nice thing is we've taken care of all the interaction with those. So Alpha, basically, once you've set it up, all of our standard components and all of our standard XBasic commands, all of that works the same, because the Alpha application server for IIS handles it for you. But setting up is a little differently there. Now, here are the different security providers. First one's called web config, and in fact, when you saw that publishing, you probably saw a little web config message come up there. If you're just doing testing, you don't have to set up a full-blown security provider. What you do is you can use web config, and basically what it takes is your local, and I'm going to show you this in a moment, it takes your local username, passwords, groups, etc., and kind of puts it up on the server as a flat file that's available. Really nice for testing purposes. But that's not really how you go to production. What you go to production is you're using either a SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, or even a custom one that's available. And often I've been using MySQL. SQL Server is very powerful. And so what happens is, what a security provider is that IIS will call a .NET library that handles security. And then it talks to the databases. So you never talk to the database directly. It basically calls in the database and handles it. And what's kind of cool too, and this is more advanced, is that in a single database, you can have actually multiple applications data. It's pretty cool. You're not limited to one, whereas Alpha is kind of a single set of data tables to handle an application from that. But you can pick those ones from there. And so basically how it works is that I put these together, but I hope they're not confusing. Let me do there. Okay. Yep. So basically how it works is that Alpha, the client says, I'm going to log in. So IIS says, great. It passes it off with Alpha's term to a .NET assembly that then, and maybe this is a better one here. I don't like these slides. I apologize. They're probably more confusing, but I'll stick with this one for here. So what happens is, much like Alpha right now, is that what Alpha does is if you're using a standalone server, what Alpha does is that inside the Alpha application server, we just query those database tables with web security users, groups, etc., and then handle the data for you. In the IIS world, you actually need to specify and tell IIS, here's a security provider, and the provider actually it calls .NET, and then .NET talks to the actual tables from that standpoint. So just philosophically, it's a little different in terms of how it works. Very important is you never ever modify database security tables directly. You always use Alpha through either components in there. Super important because of these scenarios that will occur here. So what I'm going to do is, kind of show as tell. I'm going to actually go back in and show you how I set up security and handle it from there. So I'm going to go back into my development environment. I'm going to go back to my other project since I have it kind of already set up here. So this is a standard Alpha project. So I've got a home page, and it says, welcome to my home page there. I've got a login, and on that login is a login component, like we've done everything. So the components and everything are going to be identical in terms of what you're doing in there. In this case, I've got a very simple system where I have an index page, and that index page, I've got a login page that inside that login page is my login component. So I'm just using it how I do from the other pieces there. Then I have a home page that once I log in, it gets redirected to the home page. Okay, so I'm going to go into my web security here. I've set up web security. Again, this is all the same as doing with regular Alpha. So I've got my redirect page for a login saying that if the person doesn't have credentials, they're going to be sent to the login. I've created another one called login security, which is if there's a failure, like if they have insufficient, it goes to a different login page, just to tell them a little bit differently. Login pages, once I've logged in, it's going to redirect me to home.a5w. I use my password stuff here, same there. All of this. So this is all the same. And in fact, I've got a user called administrator@test.com, and they're part of one single group here. So you don't have to worry about creating a whole new different weird. You just set everything up the same. Where the change is when you set up your publishing profile. So now I'm going to go into my profiles here, and I'm going to go to my original one here. And so this is the difference. So everything else is going to be the same. You'll notice I'm going to the server URL, I'm doing the username, password, all that. But now when I come down here to miscellaneous, you'll see security store type, okay? So this is where I decide if I'm going to use web config, which is for testing, or specific IIS providers. Now, what I highly suggest you do is select web config for testing purposes. So you'll notice that once I did that, I don't have to change anything else. You'll notice that I just have web config there. I could either pick specific IIS providers or web config, or by the way, you can use Active Directory. So much like we do before, 3 options basically available. So I'm going to click web config, and let me show you what that looks like. So now I click OK. So basically everything's the same, but I just said I'm going to use security, and I'm going to use the web config. So I'm going to type test thing here. So now when I go ahead and do my publish, I'm going to publish it up to my server, compiles everything together. It's going to actually look at my local security database, grab the users and groups and all that things associated with it, and now I'm publishing it to the service. So it's calling 8172, it's publishing there, and you'll notice in a moment it's going to say web config file. It may go by quickly. So it's going to take a few more moments because I have a few more components. It's deploying. And then notice last step it's going to take here is encrypting web.config and putting it up there. And I'll show you what it looks like on the server. Okay, and it's deploying it there. Okay, so now I've deployed this solution with that. So now I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to my default here. You'll notice that since I've got security enabled, it goes to my login page. Here's my login component. So I'm going to go administrator@test.com. I'll forget the password. Oh, doesn't like it. Everything's the same. So I'm going to do administrator at test.com, and I'm going to go ahead and put in password. Click login. It runs the standard ones there, and since I worked, it took me to the home page. So the key thing I want to get across to you is that two things. One, when you set up security, do everything the same you normally do. It's only when you publish that it's different. And then two, there is a couple of different ways you can publish it. Now, if I go to my server here, and I'm going to go into my server here, and I'm going to look at my default website, and I'm going to explore, and I'm going to look inside my folder here. So you'll see down here that Alpha, that it has created a web.config file that is in this folder. And inside that web.config file is my username and password. So this is not meant for production. You want to use a security provider, which I'll show you in a few moments. What this is a web config file, and inside this, I could look at it. Let's see if I can open up Webpack. You'll see that, you'll notice that in here, it was just there. I think I went by it. Maybe it's farther down at the bottom. Where's my users? So I've got user, and then it's done the it's encoded or encrypted it for me, but it's all in here. That's not how we do things in a production environment. So what do we want to do next? What we really want to do is we want to use what's called an IIS service provider. And so I'm going to go into my profile. Before I do that, let me go to Tools, Alpha504 Connection String. Nope, all good. Okay, so I'm going to go Tools. Oh, I'm sorry, not Tools. I'm going to go into Profiles, and I'm going to select my certification, and I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to go to Security Store Type. So I've been using web config. You'll notice it wraps it into a single file, sends it up there. Now I want to use a specific security provider. And what I'm really telling you it is, which database do I want to use to store it in? So in this case, I have a MySQL database that I would like to store it in. So it's going to handle all the communication with that, but we have SQL Server in there, so you can use any one of those from there. Okay. I'll come back and talk about membership provider version in a few more moments here. But here, so since I've defined that I'm going to have it use in this case, a MySQL database, you'll notice here the membership provider connection string. And what that is the pointer to where my database is. So I'm going to open up that, and this is my password. I'm going to I'm going to have to change my password now. But basically, it's going to an IIS server. In this case, it's actually on a different server, so you're not located there. But normally what you do is it would be on the same server. Or now, actually, I take you back. The right thing to do is put it on a second server. So let me build that. Okay. So you would select what server you're going to, the username and the password, and the database on that server, and save my password. So this is very similar to putting together Alpha504 connection string. In fact, it's almost identical from there. And so now when Alpha in IIS says, oh, someone needs to log in, what it's going to do is say, okay, we're going to use a MySQL service provider. Here is the connection string, and it's going to go ahead and do that and connect to that for you. So that's the only real big difference, is this concept of a security provider. And you're not limited to just web config. You can use MySQL, you can use SQL Server, you can use Oracle, etc. But there's one catch, and this is very, very important, and I'll show you in a few moments here, is that these databases, what's kind of nice is that if you have not set that server up, it will auto-generate the schema for you. So what it will do is, the first time you publish, if you haven't published security before, it's going to go up there. The Alpha application server is going to tell the .NET assembly, hey, I need to set up this database. The .NET will actually go into your database, the one that you gave it in the connection string, and actually set up all the tables for you. And therefore, all those tables are set up, and you never have to deal with it from there. But there's a very important caveat that I have to explain in a few minutes, in a couple minutes to do that. So again, you select your specific IIS provider, you click MySQL or SQL Server, you tell it the connection string, and the rest of this will be defaulted. And now I've set up my profile. So now when I hit publish, to the IIS certificate server, instead of saying web component, you'll notice that, oh, it will allow me to publish my security data because it's going to boot my local security data into that database structure. And you're actually given some different options. One is to preserve. It says, you know, only put stuff up there if it doesn't exist. You can actually replace all the users and roles. You can merge it. You can do pieces there. I'm going to do a replace because I basically want to take my local data and make sure it's up in that SQL server there. Now when I click publish, what it's going to do is during this process, and handled by Alpha, is that it's going to pull my current location, my current there. You'll notice in publish mode, it went really fast, but what it did is it took my local security data, it called IIS and the .NET provider up there and said, I want to put this information into that security provider database. It goes fine, took the SQL connection string and put it up there. And in fact, I'll show you what it looks like in a moment. So then it goes through the rest of its process to go ahead and publish the server to the application. So everything else is the same. But in this case now, and it does still put a web config, but it doesn't put the user information in web config now. It puts it into the server. So in there, it's all solved. Now if I go back in here, do a refresh. Should have logged me out since I redeployed it. Oh no, IIS is pretty smart, remember there. So now when I do this, I'm going to go administrator@test.com, password. When I click login, it's not looking at the web config, it's going to call the database that one I specified in MySQL and then go there. So that's the tricky part, is just setting that up. Now to show you what happened behind the scene, I'm going to go into Navicat and I'm going to go up to my server and I'm going to put in, I think it's in demonstration as the serve. Okay, so behind the scenes, let me go back here. Let me see. Yeah, demonstration. Oh, did I go localhost? It's up on my server. Sorry. Okay. So I'm going to go to my server. I'm going to open up that database called demonstration. Okay. And you'll notice, check this out. Okay. So what happens is the first time you run that, if these tables don't exist, IIS will, and the .NET assemblies up there will create these for you. So for instance, if I go in here and look, here's my, let's see, users. You'll see there's administrator@test.com. And then if I go in here and I go into roles. So it's very similar to Alpha's, but it handles, there's administrators, and then I have users and roles, which is saying my users and roles. So very similar, but you'll see there's a whole bunch of other things. Now, there's a couple of cool things about this, and I only have about 8 minutes left, so I have to throw a couple things here. But first and foremost is that if you are working with a client, they may already be using a service provider for another application that was written in .NET or Visual Studio or something like that. The other is that this set of tables can actually support multiple applications, meaning that it's smart enough to say, oh, here's one application, but I could have 5 of them, so you can actually consolidate and have all of your different applications use one set of tables. It's pretty cool. And when we get into the cloud stuff, it's handled a lot more there. Now, before we break, it's very important. I got to do a quick recap, but there's something very, very important. When I click publish here and I do this, it is important that if you're using MySQL, SQL Server is supported out of the gate, but if you're using MySQL, there is a piece of software that has to be installed on the server. So let me go back over to my server there, and this is super important because you'll get an error. There's something called the MySQL connector, and it's a free piece of software. So in this case, I want to use that. So let me go ahead and go here and go to MySQL connector. You go to for MySQL connectors. Okay, for .NET, right here. Or let's see, it's Let me open that up to show it. Yep, .net. Because what's happening is when IIS talks to those assemblies then need to call MySQL. If this is not present on the server, then it will break, meaning that it will return an error. So if you're going to use SQL Server, it's built in because it's all IIS, it's all Microsoft products, you're good. But if you're going to use SQL Server as your service provider, i.e. the database, then you have to make sure to put in your MySQL connector. Now, another thing that's really important there is you'll notice that the one I'm using on here is called 6.9.9. There are different versions. It may already be installed on your server. When you set up your publishing profile, if I go down here to here, you'll notice that the provider is that same number. It's looking for that connector number. So it's called 6.999, so, or 99.0. So that's just a little gotcha. Is if you're using SQL Server, just go ahead and just set SQL Server, L2 with their S. If you're MySQL, just make sure on your server that you have installed the MySQL connector net 6.99 or whatever the current version is, and then in your publishing profile, make sure this matches what that version is. Because otherwise what happens, you'll get an error saying that the security provider couldn't connect to the database. Okay, so I'm going to do a real quick recap of what we went through. So let me go back up here. We'll go through the steps here. I'm not going to go through all the advantage. We kind of did that there. But the publishing step. And by the way, I'm going to put out a checklist that I was not able to finish today. I'm going to send that, and then Dave will be forwarding it out to everybody else there. So the process, that's a bad process. I'm going to actually just go through and show you on the server. It's easy there, since we go through there. Okay, so on the server, once you've set up IIS, you run the Alpha installation. Then once you've done that, you set up the license, you set up the direct publishing, you use the Get Web platform to get web deploy, which installs the management service. You can just accept the 8172. Then what you need to do is go into the firewall system. And then once you're in the firewall system, let me see here. Let me go back and do that again. Okay. Set up your security. Make sure you set up an inbound rule for 8172. Otherwise, it's going to be blocked. Also, make sure you have set up here in the direct publishing the administrator or user you're going to log in with. Otherwise, it's going to, as you saw, throw an error there. Now that you've set up all that and everything's looking good on the server side, now in your publishing profile, you create a new publishing, and actually I'll use the wizard right now. Oops. Go to profiles, new, add a new profile. You select IIS. It's direct. You put in the address, 7.0.01, whatever your address is. If you're on the local, you can use integrated, and other than this, you go administrator, and then the password to log on to that system. Okay, ignore the certification. Later on, you can turn that off when you go into production. Site name will always be default website and application name. Once you've done that initial deployment, then you can start adding in application names to set up different applications on the server. I don't think there's any advanced stuff here. Nope. And then use the application pool standard, and then the server location default. Remember, you can have multiple versions running on the server. You can use web config initially, which I highly recommend. That way you keep things simple for yourself. But then in here, if I set up here, this is where I can set up my SQL server. Like for instance, I'm going to select MySQL. You put in your connection string. You put in the version you're going to use and those pieces here. And then once you're done, you've set up your publishing profile. You can then publish. Once you're ready to go, you can change your service, your specific providers to, instead of web config, here you set up the type of database, the provider version. There's a bunch of others that are defaulted, but for instance, I've set the role provider as the same as membership. session state, those things. Those are a little more advanced topic, but you can tune it up. You can use different databases for different pieces there. And then once you go to publish, if you set that up, you can decide how you want to move your data up there. Be careful. Once you've set up your server, if people are adding users and groups, you don't want to do replace. Otherwise, you'll it's like your production database will do there. So you can do a merge, just adding new people you've added locally. Very similar to the Alpha situation where you're publishing that there. And that's a quick overview, just kind of a quick wrap up there. We only have a few minutes left, but I mean, are there any questions or pieces? We are recording this. You'll be provided. I'm going to put together a checklist, or I wasn't able to finish it and get it over to you. But I want to try and keep to our schedule. We only have a couple minutes left, but please ask questions.
Excellent. In addition, there will also be a quiz, which will show up in the syllabus page. And if you do have questions, do send them over to guides, Guides, at alphasoftware.com. We do have one quick question, and that is, you were saying that you set it up in the application pools section, that you want to do it as a private application pool. The question is, can you just give a brief description of what an application pool actually is?
I'm going to have to come back with you. It has to do with how, well, okay. So what IIS can do is it can run multiple servers, and it can manage it all for you. So I'll have to get a better defined answer back to you, and I don't know if there's an article on our documentation that talks about this concept, and Sarah, if there is, just pop it in there. But I'll follow up and get the answer back, and we'll send it to everybody. But it's the idea is you can set up different pools of applications running on the server. So if I go in here, you'll notice that there's some pre-defaulted ones here. So you'll notice its default website is there, but also I have a different application pool called Second Site, and you'll there. Now the cool thing about it below it, and this is really the power of it, is that IIS will run each of these as a separate process with IIS. So if, for instance, all of a sudden something bad happens on Second Site and it dies, it doesn't bring down all of the other sites because each one's running in what's called an application pool. And I'm going to verify and make sure this is the proper description of it. But the neat thing about that is that IIS is very fault tolerant, meaning that if a site goes haywire, it doesn't bring down all the other sites that are running on IIS. IIS will control, stop, restart that, handle it for you, or just take it offline if it's behaving badly. And you'll notice that it automatically creates it. Now, with that, you can give it like parameters saying, hey, IIS, when you set up this application pool for this site, tune it this way, do it. And that's much more of an advanced tuning kind of concept, but we'll get a little bit more. But that's the core is that it sets up each site as a separate kind of area so that they don't trash each other in case one goes bad.